Hi, welcome to episode 12 of the Stitching Book Nerd podcast. My name is Dana, I'm your host, and this is our very first all book episode. So, last time I talked about, I think I'm going to split up the crafts and the books into separate episodes. So, each one will be every 2 weeks. So, I'll now be releasing videos every week, but they'll alternate. And I think that's going to help, one, make the episodes a little shorter, and then two, give me time to talk about the books and not feel like I'm like cramming them in at the end. Because I do want them to be a vocal point of the podcast too, because I do really like reading. So let's jump into it, shall we? So the last time I talked about books was 2 episodes ago, because the last episode was all crafts. So since then, I'll talk about what I finished reading, what I'm currently reading, and then we have a new segment that I'm really excited about that we'll talk about in a second. So, I finished, last time I was reading, Wuthering Heights, which had been on hiatus for a little while. That's what I'm currently reading right now. So hopefully I'm gonna finish that up before I start anything else, because it's the only book I'm reading right now, and then I'll mark that off my list. But I'll talk about that in a second. But since last time, I have finished a lot of books. The two I was talking about last time, Princess Academy and The Palace of Stone, which is the second Princess Academy book. I finished that, and I also finished Return to the Willows, which was by Jacqueline Kelly, and is a sequel that she wrote for Wind in the Willows, which is by Kenneth Graham. I really liked it. It was really well done. It felt very authentic to the original Wind in the Willows, but without trying to be Kenneth Graham, I guess. And it was really well done. It was original. It didn't feel forced at all, which can happen sometimes when an author is writing a sequel for another author's works, especially one as iconic as Wind in the Willows. And yeah, I was just really impressed with how well it was done. Jacqueline Kelly, again, is a great author in her own right, so she was perfect for the job. And like I said last time, it's one I would like to have in my own collection. So it was just really good and funny, as Wind in the Willows is, and sweet, and just great fun. So I like that, but I took it back to the library, so I don't have it to show. And then I also finished Princess Academy and The Palace of Stone, which is by Shannon Hale. Shannon Hale is a great young adult fantasy author. She writes really original stuff that doesn't feel derivative. Derivative. I guess some of them pull from like certain folk tales and things like that, but it doesn't feel derivative of anyone else that's writing right now. I say that except for this book. Princess Academy, the first book, was really good. It's classic. It feels timeless. Super original story. The characters are great. It doesn't suffer from a lot of the things that young adult is suffering from right now. Although I guess, so this book is pretty firmly young adult. The first Princess Academy is more upper middle grade. But yeah, so the first one is really great. I highly recommend it. This one is okay. So at the end of Princess Academy, someone is chosen to be the princess, and she the next year, she goes to the capital to get married to the prince, and then she invites other girls that were at the Princess Academy to come with her, either to study or to learn new crafts or to become courtier people in the court, because they have nobility now because they went to the Princess Academy. And then they start dealing with issues like politics and rebellion and revolution and other things, and it just felt forced kind of, and it just seemed unnecessary. And honestly, and I don't really think this because, like I said, I have a lot of respect for Shannon Hale as an author, but in some ways it feels like it's trying to cash in on the whole dystopian thing that's going on in young adult literature right now. So while it wasn't like apocalyptic at all, there was a dystopian feel to it, and it just felt weird, kind of hollow. There wasn't a lot of meat behind it. So I didn't give it a very good rating. I'm not exactly sure. I think I gave it 2 or 3 stars. Probably 2, I think. If not, I will probably change it to 2. It just wasn't. It wasn't even fun in terms of like spending time with characters that you like. Because again, it just felt like unnecessary. So, highly recommend the first one. Not as much this one. Although if you do read it, it's not like it's like horrendous to read or incredibly poorly written. It just doesn't feel necessary. So yeah. So not super impressed with this one. Like I said, I liked the first one so much there wasn't any way I wasn't going to not read it. So such is life. So other things I have read, when I took Returning the Willows back to the library, I got a lot of more library books, including the last 3 books in the Song of the Lioness Quartet, which is by Tamora Pierce. So I had read the first one earlier this year. I listened to it on audiobook. Tamora Pierce was a huge author when I was growing up for me, and she still is a very popular young adult author. And so it's hard for me to give an honest review of these books because they're very sentimental to me, or I'm very sentimental about them. But they're highly enjoyable if you like fantasy. They have most of her books have female characters as the lead, and they're strong female characters, but realistic too. So anyway, this is Alana, who wants to become a lady knight, and she disguises herself as a boy in order to do so. And the first book is about her being a page. This book is about her being a squire, and then the last 2 books, this is a quartet, are about her being a knight. So at the end of this book, which is not really a spoiler because she says she's going to do it, probably like the first page, she reveals she's a girl when she gets her knighthood, and then so everyone knows she's a girl here, but in most of this one, in the first one, they don't know she's a girl. So anyway, they're super quick reads, especially since I've read them before, and just a lot of fun. It's always nice. I like rereading books because it's nice to go back to things that you know that you like a lot. So, yes, highly recommended. Reading them as an adult, there are a couple things that trouble me about some of her relationships, but for the most part, she is a reasonable person who looks at relationships from a reasonable point of view, and it's not what you typically see in young adult literature these days, which is girls who act like they have no common sense when it comes to being in relationships with people, romantic or otherwise. And so she does a good job of just kind of keeping her head and not getting, while she still is emotional and she's a teenager and has feelings for people, she doesn't get overwhelmed by them, which I think we kind of encourage this hysteria when it comes to young love. And so, like I said, she is in love, she experiences that, but it's not ridiculous. So, these are really good. I like them. Okay, so I read those. And then the last book that I finished, so this is about books, but I snuck some crafting in here. I read this book of essays called Knitting Yarns, which is a book of essays of writers on knitting. So you have people who write for a living, people you might recognize, Anne Patchett, Barbara Kingsolver's in here, and Jane Smiley, lots of other authors in here who write about knitting. So it could be anything about them knitting or people in their lives knitting, like their mom or something like that. It's got funny stories, it has sad stories, it has stories in between, it has some introspective things about knitting, like more like the philosophy behind knitting or crafting. I found it really enjoyable. There wasn't one story that I did like absolutely hated. Some of them were really interesting, some were just well written. So if you like knitting or crafting, or you're interested in handmade things and the stories behind them, I highly recommend Knitting Yarns, which is edited by Anne Hood. So, very good. And it is a book of essays, so it was kind of nice to have little short pieces to read. And, oh, and there are some patterns in here. There are 6 patterns in here, so not bad. See, that's less good. So currently, like I said, I'm reading Wuthering Heights, and I hope to finish that up. I like Wuthering Heights fine. It is not my favorite British literature that I've read. So I like 19th century British literature a lot. So like Jane Austen, George Eliot, Elizabeth Crawford. No. Elizabeth Cross. I can't remember her last name. She wrote Cranford, and North and South, among other things. And I like Jane Eyre, so I do like some of the Gothic stuff. Wuthering Heights, I'm not as into. I'm just kind of over the story. So maybe it'll pick up. But I am going to finish it, so I hope it gets more interesting or something. So yeah, so that's what I'm reading, and then after that, I will look for new things to read, either from my own books or at the library. So that brings us to our new section. So we moved, and when we moved, we brought all of our books, most of which are my books. My husband likes to read, but he does not have quite the fascination I do with collecting books. And I collected a lot of books before we got married. So we have somewhere between 1,000 and 1,200 books that used to be in our home on bookshelves, which was great. But we moved, and when we moved, we got rid of our bookshelves because they were really old. Or not old, but they were cheap to begin with, and so they weren't really going to survive another move. So we haven't gotten new bookshelves. So currently all of our books are still in boxes, and which is kind of sad because I can't. One, if I want to find something, I have 0 ideas where it is, and 2, I can't look at them all the time. But it was the wanting to find something that gave me the idea for this segment, which is I want to find my piano music. I know it's here somewhere, but it's in one of the book boxes. I don't know which one. So in our garage right now, there's a wall of book boxes, and so I need to go through them to find the piano music. And so I thought when I did that, each time I went through a box, I would film it and do kind of an unboxing segment and talk to you about the books in the box. Most of them, again, are mine. The ones that are my husband's, I won't have much to say about probably, because we don't have that much similar taste in books. But anyway, so I'll talk to you about books I've read, books I haven't read, why I have books in my collection, any stories I have about them, anything like that. And it will be a surprise to me as well as you, because I don't know what's in these boxes. They got packed randomly. My books have no order when they are out on shelves. They're not alphabetized or categorized really, except for my math books. So, yeah. And I think most of the math books have been unpacked, so you won't have to sit through an episode of me talking about math books, hopefully. Unless you would like to. If you do, let me know, and we can do that. But I won't sink into that. So anyway, let us start, shall we? So I just opened up this book, so I cheated. I've seen the first 2 or 3 books on top, but we'll talk about them. So the first book is The Thief, which is by Megan Whalen Turner. This is a highly recommended book, young adult book. It's very interesting. It takes place in a fictional world that is sort of akin to like ancient Roman or Greek times. And I have read this, but I've kind of forgot about it. I do know. Yeah, so the thief, there's a boy who's a thief, and he gets caught by the king's policemen people, and they decide instead of going to jail, he has to go on a journey to try to get some treasure somewhere, and he goes with a guy that works for the king. There's this whole big story about it, and there's country fighting and blah blah blah, and at the end there's a big twist, and it's very interesting, and it's just different, and it's funny, very witty, and good, and not that long of a read, but substantial. So highly recommend this. There are 2 more books in the series, I think, and I want to read them, but I haven't yet. I think it's the only one. No, I have one more. I think I have Queen of Italia, I think is the second one. So anyway, highly recommended. So The Thief, Megan Whalen Turner, and this was a Newbery Honor book in 1997. Okay, so there's one. The next one is My Life as an Experiment by A.J. Jacobs. So A.J. Jacobs wrote, he's written a few books like this, like The Year of Living Biblically and The Know-It-All. I think The Know-It-All, he tried to read the Encyclopedia Britannica from A to Z, and then The Year of Living Biblically, he tried to take the Bible literally for a whole year in terms of living. And in this, book, I think, I'm not really sure what he is here. Just lots of different experiments, basically. So, I've heard great things about these other two books, and this one was on sale or something when I bought it. So, yeah, I haven't read this, but I would like to. So, another reason I'm doing this is I need books to read after Wuthering Heights, so I will make a stack of books I haven't read. This book is my husband's, Democracy in America, Alexis Tocqueville. He's a political science history major. Totally up his alley, I guess. I don't think he's read it, so maybe it's not his alley. It wasn't one time. Not reading this. Okay, nothing to say then. Okay. We have Willa Cather, The Professor's House. I think I brought this because Willa Cather's classics, classical literature, and I haven't read it. Don't have much to say. So that's all I know about it. The BFG by Roald Dahl. This is probably one of the few Roald Dahl books I haven't read, so I should probably get on that. But I love Roald Dahl. He's written some really interesting adult short fiction. I think just short fiction. It almost has like a horror twist to it. It's really interesting. There's a collection of stories called Skin that actually I really like. It was twisted and weird, which I usually don't like, but I like that a lot because he's a great author. So anyway, but I haven't read the BFG. Shame on me for not having read it. So I'll put it in the pile of books I read. Another book I haven't read. You'll find most of the books I haven't read. I have read a fair amount of them, and most of them not. I mean, I do have only 1,000 books, so odds are I haven't read it. Okay, Princess Ben. This is a young adult book that I heard lots of good things about. I'm not sure why her name is Ben, but some fantasy thing. Her parents are gone or dead, and she has stuff to do. I don't know, but I heard good things about it, and I think it was on sale at the same place that the A.J. Jacobs book was, and I bought it. Okay, next we have Orson Creek, and sorry, there's some nudity, by Margaret Atwood, who I am super ashamed to say I have not read anything by. I do own several books by her. I never read them. Shame on me. But anyway, this book I probably bought because Rory Gilmore talked about it on Gilmore Girls, to be frank, and other people I know like it. I think she talked about it. Pretty sure. So yeah, here's a book I need to read. Maybe the segment won't be as exciting as I thought it would. It'll just be me saying I need to read books. Here's one I have read. We used to do these 5-minute mysteries, so it's like you'll do a little short story about a mystery, and at the end it'll ask you a question like, how is the detective sure that so and so did this, one specific thing, and you have to figure it out, and all the information you need is in the 5-minute mystery part, the little story that you just read. And when I was in elementary school, I was in GT, which was Gifted and Talented, just for kids who were tested at a certain level. I don't know, we weren't like super smart, it was whatever. But anyway, it was like an enrichment program. And we used to do these as a class, our teacher would read them to us, and we would try to figure them out, and we had so much fun. And so when I found this, I bought it, and it's just kind of fun to read too. I never can guess what's going on. They're quite difficult, but a lot of them. Okay, here's a book I have read, The Fourth Bear, which is a Jasper Fforde book. This is in the Nursery Crime series, and it is I think it's No, it's the second book. I think there's two that I know of. The first one was the Big Over Easy. So the Nurse Crime series, you have a detective, Detective Jack Sprat, and they live in this world where like nursery rhymes are sort of real, and but it's like a kind of like a police procedural, but with nursery rhymes, and it's just funny. Just Before is hilarious. I know Mackenzie on the Lovely Ray had talked about the Thursday Next series, which I haven't read yet. I do own the first one or so, but I have read this and I love it. He's hilarious. So yeah, if you like humor and mysteries, this is really good, and it's just unique. He's a really good author. The next thing I read, or no, I haven't read this. Dr. Doolittle's Garden. You Lofting. This is a Dr. Doolittle book, I think. I have a few of these because I saw them one time at a thrift store. And Dr. Doolittle, of course, is classic children's literature. And I haven't read it though, but it's in my collection. So there you go. And it is not the first one. I think that's Dr. Doolittle's Village. So for those of you who don't know, Dr. Doolittle can talk to animals, and so it has many adventures. So like there was the Eddie Murphy movie when I was a kid where he was Dr. Doolittle, but it wasn't really based on that. It was just the concept that he could talk to animals. That has nothing to do with those books except for the talking animals part. Okay, this is an interesting book that I've read. A Circle of Quiet by Madeline L'Engle, who wrote A Wrinkle in Time, quite famously. This is book one of, she published a series of her journal writings called the Crosswicks Journal, and this is book one. And it's just a lot about her life, and also just her writing. So it's like a true journal, so it's not a diary. It's about her writing about her faith. So she was Christian, although you get the feeling that she was more of a liberal Christian, although I don't know that for sure. She may have been more conservative than I think, but she's beautiful writing, especially about faith and things like that, and family, and balancing. So she had many children, and she was balancing being a writer with being a mother, and she talks about, I remember correctly, into depression and stuff, but in a very beautiful way, and it's not like a preachy way or a depressing way, which sounds odd, but they're very good, and this is not something I would usually enjoy, but she's a phenomenal writer and super brilliant, and I need to get back into reading it. So I finished this one and I haven't read. I don't know that. I don't know if I own the second one or not. I just love the cover. Really pretty. I am a believer in having beautiful book covers, so much to the point that if I was allowed to roam free in bookstores, I would come home with like the same book in several different covers, and I actually do own several books on the same cover. Several of the same book in different covers. What are you doing? Good night. Okay, sorry. This is my husband interrupting. Anyway, next book. So this is another Newbery Honor, which is probably why I bought it. I've heard lots of good things about this. This is by Carl Hiaasen, and he actually has written several adult novels as well and children's novels, and they tend to be set in Florida and have an environmental spin to them. His adult novels are mysteries, and I don't know much about them, besides what I just told you. But this is supposed to be really good, and I think it has an environmental twist to it, probably from your house, and I need to read it because it's a very well-known children's book that's highly respected. Okay, next book. The Time Traveler's Wife. This was super duper popular many years ago, I think when I was in high school. It's by by Audrey Niffenegger for time travel books, and not everyone likes them. I do, because I just think you can do so many interesting things with time travel. That's probably why I like Doctor Who. But she did a really good job with this, and it's interesting, the concept behind it. So you have a man and woman, and he can time travel, but I think it's involuntary. And so, yeah. So he kind of pops up throughout her life in random times. And it's about them trying to have a relationship with this thing that's happening. And just the way that the story's structured, because it's moving back and forth through time, it's really good. And I need to read it again. I haven't read it since high school. But it was just nice. And this paper feels so good. This is a really beautiful book. I mean, the cover's okay, but like the paper itself is just super nice and smooth and high quality, and it feels great. So I need to reread this, but this is very good, and as long as it stands up to the test of me remembering it over time, I highly recommend it. They made a movie about it. I'm sure that was not very good. I didn't see it, but I don't know how you could express the nuance of that book in a movie. So anyway, okay. This is a collection of short stories, Ethan From and Selected Stories by Edith Wharton. I can tell you I bought this because it is a Barnes & Noble classic, and for a while I was obsessed with collecting them. Haven't read it. Will someday. The end. Okay. Next, my crappy movie cover version of My Life in France by Julia Child. I have read this. It was really interesting, and I liked it a lot. She had such an interesting life, and she writes beautifully about food, and I do like to read about food, because I like cooking and eating. Well, yeah, eating, but different foods and things like that. And so, while I wish I had a different cover of this, I think this was the only one I could find at the time, and I wanted to read it before I saw Julie and Julia the movie. And I also read this book, Julie and Julia, which was about the lady that spent like a year going through the Mastering the Art of French Cooking cookbook that Julia Child wrote. This was a fascinating story about her life and how she became who she was. And I highly recommend it if you're interested in biographies or food or Julia Child or France. Because another thing, it will make you want to move to France, because she, it sounds like, well, at that time, a beautiful place to live. Okay. Next, this is one of my all-time favorite books, and I do not have that many all-time favorite books, like hands down perfect. So I like British literature a lot. Modern British literature, old British literature, whatever you want. And this is one of my favorite books. This is Cold Comfort Farm by Stella Gibbons. I have one of the lovely England Classics Deluxe editions. They did several with this illustrator doing the cover. This is an amazing book. It was written back in the 1920s, I think. Somewhere. No. It was published in 1932 for the first time. It has like a crazy cast of characters, and you have a young girl who comes. She's like a very hangs out with very posh people, and she goes to this farm in I believe it's in Yorkshire. I think it's in Yorkshire. Anyway, and you have like these very rural characters who have accents you can't understand, and they all have these crazy lives, and such distinct characters. She has an aunt and a cousin who's like, what's her cousin? Like, her cousin's like this like woodsy free spirit person, and her uncle is like a fire and brimstone Bible thumper that's giving all these lectures, and she has a cousin that wants to be in the movies, but he's a farmhand. And it's just crazy, and I'm not doing it justice. It's so good. Brilliant. And she's written another book that I have, because a lot of her stuff is out of print, because it was written a long time ago. But since this one, they came out with this one again, and it kind of became popular again, I think they've released some more things. But But the other one I read at first was really good too. But this is really, really good. Again, definitely probably my top 5 books of all time. If I put Harry Potter as one book, which it could be one book. So yeah, fantastic. Read it. Super hilarious. Okay. Next book. This is a children's book. This is called The Candy Makers. It's by Lindy Mass. This book came out just a couple years ago. It's probably 4 or 5 years ago. Yeah, 4 years ago. And I'm sorry, I don't keep a lot of dust jackets. They drive me nuts, and I just don't keep them. I've gotten sort of do sometimes, but anyway, so I have to look at a blue book. But this book was really interesting and different. So these kids, the main character, one of the main characters, lives in a candy factory with his parents. Maybe his mom died or something. Anyway, then they have a contest for all these kids to come and make their own candy. But there's also some mystery to this, and all the kids kind of have an interesting background that kind of comes out as you read it. It was just super interesting and original and fun and funny and smart in some ways. And again, it was a lot of fun and unexpectedly so. So, a great original children's book. Would be good for both boys and girls. There's not really a slant towards either one. And just lots and lots of fun. So, Candy Makers, good. Okay, Bridget Jones, The Edge of Reason. This is the second Bridget Jones book. There's another one out, but I need to reread the first 2 because I haven't read them in a long time. This was, we made a video about this one as well. And I love Bridget Jones. She's really funny. And Helen Fielding did a great job with these books. This one, I remember at times like it was veering towards absurdist humor, which I like a lot. But that could be me remembering it wrong. So anyway, need to reread this, but read it all. Oh, and here's the other Bridget Jones diary, the first one, movie tie-in version. This movie tie-in I don't care about because I like this movie a lot. But yes. Okay, another little doll, Twits. This is a very short book. It's like a little baby book. It's about the Twits. It's like this man and woman who are the meanest. They are the smelliest, nastiest, ugliest people in the world. And then like some creatures come and change things. I have read it, but it doesn't really stand out in my mind, so I'm guessing it was just kind of a short little story. It's just okay. Yeah, there it is. And another Roald doll, Ezio Trot. I read this and didn't think much about it either way. Patrick Rothfuss, who wrote Name of the Wind and The Wise Man's Fear. So the King Killer Chronicles, which are really good. Well, I haven't read the second one yet, but the first one was really good. He has a blog, and he wrote about this and about reading it to his child, and how he didn't like the way that it ended, because basically this man used this deception to get a woman to like him, and he didn't want to read that to his young, impressionable son, and so he made up an ending to the story that was different. And after he said that, those things have kind of started standing out to me more as I get older. So I haven't read it since then, but it is a cute little fun story. But when you think about things like that, it makes it kind of not as appealing. So anyway, another Roald doll. Okay, moving on. Wolfensh's Curriculum and Mythology. I got this for my Myth and Children's Literature course in college. And we just read parts of it because this used to be, this version, which is Wolfensh's version of Greek and Roman mythology, was used a lot in the 19th century for children to read. He changed a lot of the original Greek and Roman myths to be more appropriate. And so a lot of what we talked about in the class that I took was how we changed myths and folk tales to be appropriate for children, specifically the classical myths. And so that's what this is from. So I've read parts of it, but not all of it. And I think this is in abridged. No, this is unabridged. Unabridged. Really good book, Animal Vegetable Miracle by Barbara Kinsolver. This is a book about her family's year-long experiment of living completely off of their own land. They have a small farm in, let's say Virginia. Maybe, no, I think it's Virginia. Anyway, they have a small farm in Appalachia somewhere, and they try to live off their own land or within off the land of a 50-mile radius around them for a year. So that meant if it didn't grow or was not raised within that radius, they could not eat it for a year. So that meant no seafood, no coffee, no bananas, no fruit out of season, things like that. They raised pigs and turkeys and planted crops and canned and preserved things. And it was just really fascinating. And also, so she talks about that and their experiences. And she also talks about just our food industry and how we now get food and the repercussions of our food industry in different ways, both as individuals and as communities and as a global community. And it's fascinating. And she's a great writer. She wrote the Puzzlement Bible, which is very popular among other things. So anyway, highly recommend this. It will change the way you think about where your food comes from, for sure, more so than those documentaries about how hot dogs are made, whatever. So there you go. Animal Vegetable Miracle. Next, we have By the Shores of Silver Lake. This is one of the Little House on the Prairie books. I've read all of these. I like them a lot. Classic children's literature. Makes you want to live in a log cabin. Good. Okay, that's one of the later ones. The Annotated Persuasion by Jane Austen. I love so there's like a series of these annotated Jane Austen books that have gorgeous covers, and when you open them up, one page is the story and the other page is annotations. So annotations could be anything like defining words that you may not recognize or that are, have a definition in the context they're being used, has a definition that we no longer use, or historical information about something that's going on. It's just a lot of fun to read, especially if you've already read the story, which I have. I really love Persuasion. It's one of my favorite Jane Austen books. I love all of Jane Austen stuff, so it doesn't really matter. But anyways, I would like to read this someday, both to read Persuasion and to read the annotated version. So there's that one. Trying to speed up. The Adventures of Tom Sawyer and The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. Haven't read these, which I'm super ashamed to say. Not good. This is not the version of Huckleberry Finn where they replace the N-word with robot, which is kind of the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. Would I say, do I think it's appropriate to use the N-word today? Absolutely not. Do I think it's important to let children understand where we've come from in our history and what it was like back then? Yes. And then don't we just change the word to robot? Then what is it? No kid believes he's talking about robots, and it's just stupid. It's done. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Google Huckleberry Finn robot, and I'll probably pull something up close to what I'm talking about. But someone took The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, and he has this friend whose name is Jim, I think, who's an African American, and because this was written back when the N-word that's derogatory term for African Americans, was used prevalently in everyday conversation. He uses it a lot in this book because there's a African American character who is there most of the time, and someone took that and replaced every instance of that word, which again is a lot, with the word robot. I don't get that. Like I said, do I think it's appropriate to use? No, absolutely not. But do I think you should change a book that was written at a time when it wasn't inappropriate to use? No, I don't think you should. I think you should have open conversation with kids about, or even teenagers who are probably people reading this. why we don't use that word now, why they used it then, what the culture was like then. Yeah, so that's dumb. But I do want to read this and The Adventure of Tom Sawyer. I love that book that had what was that actor's name? He was on Home Improvement. Anyway, I loved that movie, Tom Sawyer, when I was a kid. I don't even think it was particularly a good movie. I just liked it. Okay. Wildwood Dancing Juliet, Marie, maybe, and I'm pretending to be French. This is supposed to be really good, highly recommended. I think it's young adult fantasy, and I haven't read it yet, so maybe I'll put that in my to-read soon list. Susan Cooper, The Dark is Rising. This is in the Dark is Rising sequence, which again is a famous book, young adult literature. Haven't read it yet. You need to put it on my list. This is book 2. Book 2. Oh, this book was a Newbery Honor, and the 4th book was a Newbery Medal winner. That's interesting. And this has soon to be a major motion picture. I don't remember this being a movie, although it would have been when I bought this, or it would have been by now. But anyway. Okay. Tale of Despereaux, Kate DiCamillo. This was a movie. I did not see the movie. Kate DiCamillo writes amazing children's literature. Super original and well written and touching, but funny and just classic. Very classic children's literature. Yeah, it's just really, really good. She's written on several other books that were really great. And she just has a really interesting stories to tell. This is a book that is my husband's, The Man in the High Castle, Philip K. Dick, and I don't know much about it except for that he's a pretty famous author. Yeah. Okay. Wait. Medicus, which is a book about the Roman Empire, and I think it's a mystery, and it was supposed to be good, and I got it for Christmas, and I haven't read it yet. Mother or parents won't read it for me, so I want to read it. I haven't read it. I will put it in my file. And we're getting close to the end. Okay. The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. I never read it. I would like to. Here it is, and it's by Frank Baum. Another classic. You'll find that I like to buy things that I think they're classics. Christmas Carol and Other Stories by Charles Dickens. This is a modern library version. So between Penguin and Penguin's like 5,000 versions of covers for books, and the modern library and Everyman's library, this is why I want to own 5 copies of every book, because they're just really pretty. So I did not own A Christmas Carol, and this has other short stories in it, and so I bought it. Sounder. I haven't read this until I bought it because it won a Newbery Medal, and at some point in my life it was important to own all the Newbery Medal winners. That's still maybe important in my life. I haven't bought books in a while because 1, yarn, and 2, my husband doesn't like me having 5,000 books in our house all the time because they do take up a lot of space, and they're all my books. So he feels underrepresented, not unjustly, because again, it's 90% me on the shelves. But anyways, we have a difference in opinions on buying books. Okay, so the last 2 books I have read, The Elegance of the Hedgehog. I think I picked this up because it just had an interesting cover and title. And it was an interesting story about a very precocious young girl who is obsessed with she's decided that she wants to die. Like, she's from like a really rich family. She lives in Paris, and she decides that she no longer, like, she's just at a young age. It's like there's no point to this. Kind of in a matter of fact way, not a depressed way, really. But she meets some people who kind of show her that life has meaning, blah blah blah. But it's in a much better way than that. It's just interesting. So if you like literary fiction, this is good. I usually don't like literary fiction. As I've gotten older, that's changed when it's of a certain bent. So I really like this a lot, and I recommend it if this is your cup of tea. If that's not your cup of tea, And the last book, The Disappearing Spoon. This is nonfiction, and so this is The Disappearing Spoon and Other True Tales of Madness, Love, and the History of the World from the Periodic Table of Elements. So this is nonfiction. It's written by Sam Keen. He's getting pretty popular now for writing easy to read nonfiction about different things. I want to say he wrote one about the brain and neuroscience, but I don't know that for sure. I think this was his first really successful book. This has lots of good reviews. It was very interesting. Lots of interesting tidbits about various things about the elements and history and how those things interact. So if you like science or history or both, or you just like interesting tidbits, this one's really well written, easy to read, and interesting. So there's that. And that is the end of our first box of books. It took a little longer than I expected. I might split these up where I only do part of a box and then finish it the next time. Or if you have no interest in seeing this, or you think there's a better way to do it, or you have suggestions, or there's something else you'd like to see or hear me talk about, let me know. And if not, I'll just keep doing what I'm doing and hopefully get better at it as time goes on. I have found some books I want to read, so that's exciting. Yeah, that's it. So I will see you guys next week with some crafty updates, and in 2 weeks with more books. And I hope you have a great week, and I'll talk to you later.